This is the fourth lesson in the Introduction to Programming unit of work. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remind ourselves how computers store data, how they make decisions, how we can have more than one variable, and how operators work. And our ultimate goal is to create a calculator. So imagine that you're a calculator. What do you need to make a calculation? Well, you need to have a number stored somewhere in your mind. You need to have an operator, whether it's times, plus, divide, take away. And then you of course need another number somewhere stored in your memory, so that you've then got the 3 bits of data needed in order to carry out the calculation. So in Scratch, in order to ask the user to enter a number, an operator and another number, we again need to use the input scripts, the ask blocks. And how can we store each of those inputs? Well, as we saw last lesson, we only have one variable attached to an ask script. It's the answer variable. And as soon as we ask a second question and a third question, we'll be overwriting the data in our answer variable. So we need to create 3 separate extra variables so that we can store each of the inputs in separate locations. And once we've got that information, what then? If we're a calculator, we then need to make a decision. We've got our 2 numbers and we've got the operator, but we need to decide what to do with those 2 numbers based on whatever's in the operator variable. For example, if the operator is a plus sign, then we need to add those 2 numbers together. However, if the operator is a minus sign, we're going to subtract them. If it's a times sign, we're going to multiply them. And if it's a divide symbol, then we're going to divide them. So here is an example of how we might be able to get our program making those decisions. We've got an if statement, as we saw in lesson 2, and we've got a couple of these operator blocks. One which can check to see whether the value stored inside operator is indeed a plus symbol, and then we've also got another one where we can actually add the contents of 2 variables together, and of course we can output the result in a say script. So here we are in Scratch. Let's see if we can create our calculator. So we'll start by saying when the green flag is clicked, and then as we saw in the previous slide or couple of slides, the first thing we need to do is ask for a number. Enter a number. We then will eventually need to ask for an operator. And then we'll need to ask for a third number. Enter another number. Now, we only have the one answer variable. We need to have 3 variables where we can store the first number, another variable to store the operator, and a third to store the other number. So let's go to variables and let's make those 3 variables. Let's say that this one's called number 1. Let's make another variable, operator, and let's make another one, number 2. So after we've asked for our first number, we're then going to set our number 1 variable to whatever the user entered in response to that first question. Then we're going to ask for an operator, and we are going to again use this block to set the operator variable to contain whatever was answered for the enter an operator question. And then finally we're going to ask our third question, enter another number, and again we need to store that in our third variable, in the number 2 variable. So we're going to use a set script to do that, or a set block, and we will make sure that number 2 becomes whatever's in answer. So let's see if this works. Let's see if we can store 2 numbers and an operator all at the same time. So enter a number, 5. That goes into the number 1 variable. Enter an operator. Let's do a little times sign. That definitely goes into the operator variable. And it's asking me for another number. Let's type in 7. And that gets stored into the number 2 variable. So that is all good so far. So now our calculator needs to make a decision. And to make decisions, we're going to use if statements. So I'm going to say that first of all, let's check to see whether the operator contains a plus sign. So I'm going to use a something equals something block. I'm going to go to my variables and I'm going to put the operator in the first space, and I'm going to say if the operator is equal to a plus symbol, then what I'm going to get my cat to do is I'm going to get my cat to say the answer to the sum of number 1 plus number 2. So if the operator is a plus sign, the cat is going to output the result of number 1 plus number 2. Now I can duplicate this and I can insert it inside this else section, because if it's a plus sign, fine, it's going to add them, but if it's not, then we need to check to see if it's another symbol. So let's check to see if it's a minus sign, what we might do. Let's get rid of that and let's get a block where it will subtract one from the other. And now let's get my variables again. I'll say number 1 minus number 2. So if it's a take away sign, it's going to take those two numbers away. If it's not, we've still got 2 more checks to do. So if it's a take away sign, or not if it's a take away sign, if it's a time sign, let's do a check to see if the operator instead contains a time symbol. If it does, let's multiply those two numbers together. And then finally we will do our last check. If it's not a plus sign, not a take away sign, not a time sign, then we'll check to see if it's a divide sign. And if it is a divide sign, we will get our cat to actually divide those two numbers together. So remember, because they're if statements, it's only going to run one of these say scripts depending on what is in the operator. Now of course it might be that the user doesn't enter one of those symbols, makes a mistake, and the nice thing is we've got a little else section where we can tell the user that they entered the wrong type of operator. You entered the wrong operator. So let's test this code now. We've tested the top already. Let's see if it makes the right decisions. Let's do a plus sign. First of all, check if it adds. So I'm going to put in 4. I'm going to put in a plus sign. I'm going to put in another 4. And let's see if it produces 8. And it does. Let's now test with a time sign, for example. Let's put in a 5. Let's put in the times symbol. And let's put in a 7. And it produces 35, which is perfect. And of course, it'd be good to check to see if we enter the wrong type of operator, whether the cat responds accordingly. So let's try that. Enter a number, 4. Enter an operator. Let's put in an AND symbol. Let's put in another number, let's say 7. And the cat says you entered the wrong operator. So that's working fine. So have a go at seeing if you can create your own calculator in Scratch which brings together everything that you've learned about input statements, output statements, how you can store things in variables, how you can create your own variables, and how you can program our cat to make decisions, okay, using if-else statements.